And at this point, I'd like to call on Michael and Lauren Camarinos to stand up. Because just stand up because I want to show an example of how proud we are of our children. Archon Chris, you brought your sons. Archon Tugarakis, you brought your daughter. Who else brought children? Kokalakis, we spoke about her. Where are you, Paige? Are you here? Please stand up, Paige. Pritzos, yes, where are you? We were at your wedding not long ago. The point I want to make is we have set the example where our heart is, there is our treasure. What does that mean? Did you know, you guys got to stand up. We're not done. So Michael is a young Archon. Why is he a young Archon? You know, three components of stewardship: time, talent, treasure. Well, he began his treasure years ago, not as an Archon, but as a concerned Orthodox Christian. Exarch's appeal, a full day for years. A full day, not even an Archon. That's really laudable and praiseworthy and to be emulated. And then I get a call, you know, Lauren and I want to become founders. It's a $100,000 commitment, everybody. That's not peanuts. And then I read, I think you went to the Leadership 100 conference or something, that you became Leadership 100. How old are you? 39. Not even 40. And he's made these kind of serious commitments with his wife, Lauren, who's a longtime member of the family of Archons. Her dad was legal counsel, longtime Archon John Mavrutis, close friend. And about 40 years ago, John and Ann, his wife, and Maria and I, my wife, went to the Paul McCartney concert in Philadelphia. That tells you how far back we go. But I wanted to show these examples, Mike and Lauren, for everybody here. Chris brought his sons. Fantastic. You know, I see them as Archons. They follow your footsteps. And I see, you know, and you know my position on female Archons. I've been wanting this as a dream for years and years and years. Someday it will happen. It's not happening in the immediate future, but someday it will. And when it happens, these people who are standing and wives will be Archons. Will be Archons. So this is my point of personal privilege. We need to pass the baton to young people. We need to encourage young people when they put time, talent, and treasure on the table in a very serious way, that needs to be recognized. And we recognize you both for what you've done and what will continue to do. So here ends my point of personal privilege. The last thing, before we launch the program, and I know Father and Presbytera, Dr. Roxanne, have a very intense program. I want to thank Father Alex and Father Constantine. The services were superb. You know, to be able to chant in English, like Father Constantine and Father Nick, in English using the same melody, if you will, the original, not the Sachlamatis English and they make it up as you go along, but you guys did it the substantive Byzantine way. I know that isn't easy. You've got to practice that, no question about it. And it's impressive. It is real, even the way you sense the Byzantine Father Constantine especially. I mean, he is patriarchal to the nth degree. And I wonder where he got that from. Anyway, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We're very grateful to be here. Thank you all. Peter has done a phenomenal job, not only as treasurer, as chair of the Spirituality Committee and Retreat, and he's being recognized this year as the 2024 Nicholas J. Boers Awardee for Extraordinary Archon Stewardship. God bless. We love you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Commander, for your remarks, heartfelt and significant. Beautiful comments. Reverend Father Alex Carlutzos, Reverend Father Constantine Lazarakis, Reverend Father Nicholas Louh, beloved presbyteras, esteemed Commander Dr. Anthony J. Limberakis, distinguished guest, Ms. Lauren Green, dear brother Archons and Archon families, ladies and gentlemen. The National Archon Lenten Retreat is a period when participants reconnect with our Lord and Savior, pausing to renew, to fast, to pray, and to make offerings. It is when the Archon family experiences in unity its best spiritual life, authentically and with purpose. This is a fitting time in our journey through stillness, inner peace, and hope to strive towards oneness with God and with the promise of renewal arriving at Pascha in the brilliance of the resurrection. Our persons require fortification and our souls require spiritual boosting that the Archon Retreat offers each year. With the blessings of His Eminence Archbishop Elpidiforos of America, Exarch of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, and under the distinguished leadership of Commander Dr. Anthony J. Limberakis, Spirituality Committee Co-Chair Mike Psaros and I welcome the Archons and their families to the John Halecky Jr. 20th Annual National Archon Lenten Retreat. It is tradition for which the Order is most grateful that the Order meets in fellowship and is hosted at the Dormition of the Virgin Mary Greek Orthodox Church of the Hamptons and warmly welcomed by the Kimisis community led by the Order's spiritual advisor, the treasured and caring Reverend Father Alexander Carlutzos and Reverend Father Constantine Lazarakis, who serve as retreat pastors. It is an immense joy to gather in person while simultaneously reaching fellow Archons and their families by offering the retreat today via live stream throughout the country. For those present, or for those streaming, the Order wishes that you find the retreat transformational as well as informational. The Order is blessed that the distinguished Reverend Dr. Nicholas Louh and Presbytera Dr. Roxanne Louh serve as retreat masters this year. The program with the theme, Renewing Your Marriage, is in 3 sessions. The first, Your Personality, Your Marriage, followed the Akathist hymn last night. The second session, now to be presented, is God's Blueprint for Lasting Love. And the third one this afternoon is God's Blueprint for Fighting Right. On behalf of the Order of St. Andrew the Apostle, Archons of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, I respectfully invite Father Nicholas and Presbytera Roxanne to the podium.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Father.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our retreat. So happy that you're all here. Just want to extend echoing some of those felicitations that Archon Peter Skiadis shared to Father Alexander Carlutzos and to Father Constantine Lazarakis. I want to thank everyone a part of the Kimisis community. The food has been outstanding. The hospitality has been extraordinary, and so we thank you all for that. We also want to take this opportunity to thank Supreme Commander Dr. Anthony Limberakis and all of the team that helped to organize this retreat. And ultimately, I want to thank all of you that are here and those of you that are virtually tuning in. We are honored that you're part of this retreat. And I hope and pray that at the end of this retreat, at the end of the day, like we mentioned last night, is that all of us are in the same boat. We're all yearning to grow in our faith and to grow with each other and to grow what this theme is about renewing our marriage. So we don't come to you today as people that have all the answers or people that we never have an argument or never have any problems. That would not be truthful to all of you. Just like all of you, we have good days and bad days. We have struggles and we have strengths. But what we're hoping to share with you is not necessarily our story, but to share with you what is God's blueprint. What does God tell all of us to do in one of the most significant things that he gives to all of us and graces us with, and that is the gift of family and the gift of marriage. You can always find out information about us by going to our website at thelouhs.com, and that's you find out where we're speaking at, but also if you want to subscribe to our daily inspirational messages, again, that's louhs.com. And so as I mentioned last night, you're going to have three voices that you're going to hear today. One voice is going to be my voice speaking to you, whether here or online. The second voice will be either your own voice or that of your spouse's voice, you hearing that voice in your ear. But I want you to not hear any of those two voices, but I really want you to hear what God's voice is. What is God trying to tell you today? That as you hear our voices today, what is he saying that I need to do better at in a marriage? That no matter how long you've been married or how short of a time you've been married, all of us have opportunities to grow in our marriage. And so that's what I want you to do, is to ask yourself, God, what are you trying to tell me today? So let's get started. So I mentioned last night that you can always tell how important something is in someone's life by the priority they place on it. I told you that in the morning when you get up, all of you have a certain priority. You may get up in the morning and immediately go to the restroom or brush your teeth or comb your hair or take a shower. There is a priority that you do. It's the same thing. It has importance because what you do first sets the course for the rest of your day. In the same way, we talked last night, just in a real quick review, that Christ's very first thing that he does in the book of Genesis, in the very first chapter of the Old Testament, is to create a family. And in the New Testament, the very first thing that he does in the very first chapter is to create a family with Christ coming as a child. And we said the very first miracle that Christ does happens at the creation of a family. And the very first time that the disciples believed in him took place at a wedding. God loves the family, so much so that it was his and is his priority. But I want you to share with you that you can also remember this, that you can always tell how valuable something is in someone's life by how much they're willing to pay for it. Now, let me say this respectfully, but sometimes when you got an engagement ring, you may say to your spouse-to-be, how much did you spend on the ring? Because it simplifies or embodies a level of value that you have to it. Sometimes people will ask, how much did you spend on the wedding or spend on a piece of clothing? In Christ's life, you need to remember me telling you from the very beginning that you can tell how valuable you are in his life by how much he was willing to pay for you. One of my favorite Bible verses is Romans chapter 5, verses 8. Can you guys say the words Romans 5:8? Romans 5:8. Remember that, because it says this: God demonstrates his own love for us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So you need to know something. God does not tell you that he loves you. He doesn't, unlike any other God, not the God of Islam, not the God of Judaism, which are different gods, by the way. Don't ever lump them up all together. They're different gods. But the God of Judaism, the God of Islam, and the God of other religions, none of them, not any other God, comes down to earth for you. Like some of you, the retreat needs to stop like right now, and you just need to hear that, because when you say Christos Anesti, in about 2 weeks from now, it'll take a whole nother meaning. Because God is not waiting for you to go, okay, Nico, come a little bit better, be a little bit better in your walk of faith, and then I'm going to come down. No, while we were still sinning, while we were still gossiping, while we were still doing things that we should not be doing, God showed us how much he loved us by coming and dying for us. And you'll hear that on full display in tomorrow's gospel reading, where it talks about what his plan is. St. Greg the theologian says, what he was, he laid aside. In other words, what God was, he left heaven to come to us. What he was not, a sinner, he assumed for us. What he takes upon himself, the poverty of our flesh, so that I may receive the riches of his divinity. That is an amen statement right there, friends. That in our lives, he took upon the poverty. What does that mean? That the Bible says in the Old Testament that the wages of your sin was not you've been a bad boy. The Bible says in the Old Testament, and we hear this during Holy Week time and time again, that the wages of your sin is death. It's finished. And he says, no, he takes upon that and gives us the riches of what? The kingdom of heaven. Christ became like us. He assumed the worst like us. And then he says this extraordinary statement that Christ carried the weight of the cross so that I could be as light as a feather. Just listen to that. He carried the weight of 125 pounds, and he carried it the length of 6 football fields. He didn't go from here to that church. He carried a 125-pound cross that was against his back after being beaten and bruised for 6 hours. 125 pounds over 6 yards. He carried that so that you could be light. And so I share with you this because as every single retreat that I try to share with everyone is that God has an oracy. He has a vision for every one of you individually as well as a family. St. John Chrysostom says this: the husband and the wife should be as similar to the hand and to the eye. That when the hand hurts, the eye should be crying. And when the eyes cry, the hand should wipe away the tears. How many of our marriages, sometimes when we see our spouse going through a difficult time, we'll be like, okay, you have to deal with it. I'll go do my own stuff. But that we are working in tandem, and more important, that we are one body. He says later on, when a husband and wife are united in marriage, they are no longer seen like something earthly. It goes on to say that they are something divine. A marriage in the eyes of God is not this simple civil marriage that you have at some courthouse or even a very brief service, an hour and a half. Marriage is eternal. It has eternal consequences. And because we're kind of rushing, I'm just going to keep on going. So just because God has a dream for our marriages, listen to me, everyone, the enemy does have failures planned for your marriage. You need to know that. And yes, you may be sticking together, but let me share with you how marriages that are unsuccessful or the dreams of the enemy are satisfied. So how does it look? These are status quo marriages. These are marriages that you as a couple are just going through the daily, the weekly, the yearly routine. You're in church, you come to church, you come home, you cook. Everything's the same thing over and over and over again. It's simply a status quo marriage. And for many of us, we are simply settling where it is. How does that look? You'll hear people say, well, Father Nick, this is just the way I am. You know, I'm sorry, I may scream and yell, but I'm Greek, and that's just the way we do things. You know, that's a status quo. Or, you know what, my wife knows that I love her. I don't need to tell her that. She already knows that. Status quo. It's an average level. In other words, you spent so much time courting your spouse, and then once you had your spouse, you stopped courting her. It's a status quo. Or second of all, the wrong vision marriage. Many marriages fall in this, where this is a family that's all about making a It's all about money. It's all about notoriety. It's all about the titles that we have. And for many of us, all the vision of the family is if you were to ask yourself, what is the vision of our family? You'd love to say it's God, but the reality is that for many of us, what we're looking at more is what's going on in the news. We're looking at more what's going on in the world. Let me put it to you in a very simple way. Some of us know more about Nancy Pelosi than we know about St. Paisios. Some of us know more about Donald Trump than we know about what's going on actually in Constantinople. We have to be very careful. It's the wrong dream marriage, and you've got to always know what is the time that I'm spending in, because I may be having the wrong kind of a dream. Or maybe it's the unable to take steps marriage. This is the one that if you're like you're in your car, and last night I was with Father Constantine, and sadly his car broke down. So all that came up on the dashboard was the light that said that the battery needed to be changed. So in life it's the same way. If you looked at your marriage as though it has as if it's a car, what light would be coming on? What would be an area that would say, you know what, it's just blinking? Like you need to spend more quality time at home. Or maybe for some of you, that little beeping is saying that I need to be more patient with my wife, or I need to start communicating with my children. Some of us have all these lights going on, and basically the unable to take steps marriage is one that I know that I need to take steps, I just don't know how. And then finally, the no rush marriage. And that is the one that I'm just kind of going in, not realizing that time is ticking. Father Alex got me onto this several years ago, and it's so true. Are you all familiar with this phrase, aikidia? You need to know about this. At every single baptism in the Orthodox Church. How many of you have been to a baptism in the Orthodox Church? Raise them high. Let's get some exercise in here. Okay, great. Thank you. Those online, I can see you. Yes, a little bit more. Perfect. Okay. Aikidia is called the noonday demon. And if you're baptizing your child or your grandchild in the Pangadi, in the narthex, you will hear the priest say this phrase, and protect them from the noonday demon. And if you're going, Tinafto, what is the noonday demon? I have no idea what that is. It is a demon of slothfulness and laziness. The book of Psalms refers to this as the noonday demon. You can find it in the book of Psalms. I believe it's in chapter 91. And it says this, and St. John Climacus, who we celebrated last week, says that the ladder of divide says, right, that the hope of man, the hopeful, faithful Christian, slays aikidia and kills it with his sword. You, as Greek Orthodox Christians, or better yet, as Orthodox Christians, you need to know what aikidia is. Because whenever you find yourself lazy in your marriage, it may not come with you with a little pitchfork and a little red cape and saying, hey, I'm the enemy that I want to undermine your marriage. But that's what it is. It is the noonday demon. And the Bible, and in our church fathers, they speak about this in Psalms 91, verse 6. You can read about it. Just so you know, the Bible talks about it, and every single baptism that you, by the way, it talks about it also in the Heretismi service when they're doing the aspile and the kedos. These words of logismi and aikidia are mentioned. It's important to remember all that. So one of the greatest dreams that he has for all of us, friends, that he has for you and for me, individually and collectively, is distance. The enemy desires for there to be distance between you and God, you and your spouse, you and your church. And I know that this is meant for many of you, this is, how should I say it? I'm preaching to the choir. But my question would be is, how many of your children are actively engaged in the church? That's how it attacks. It's distance that he creates and division. Let me go one step further. St. Ignatius of Antioch says, for where there is division, God does not dwell. So yes, the enemy is okay with you as Archon saying, bravo, you're coming to church, that's great. But the enemy does not want you to bring anyone else with him, with you. It's okay that you come in there. It's okay, you want to come in, but don't you bring anyone else with you. He loves to create division. And I would argue that the battles being waged in the Christian marriage is in the crosshairs of the enemy. So you don't believe me? Let's just kind of go a little bit deeper. I'm very big on statistics, not just passion. Every 13 seconds in America, a divorce takes place. Every 13 seconds. People that just like you and me came into our office, to a priest's office perhaps, and said, I just love this person. Like they're the greatest, like they were like in that movie Jerry Maguire, like maybe you. Say it with me, everyone. You may not remember it. Okay, I'll help you with it. You complete me. Or that part in the movie The Notebook when they're running there and there's a love there. But every 13 seconds, we're having a divorce. The average husband and wife are only spending 3 to 5 minutes a day in genuine conversation. And I'm talking about genuine conversation. Only 11% of families pray together. That's important to remember that. Only 11% of families are praying together. So let me say it in a very simple way. You cannot be in a relationship with someone that you're not talking with. Only 50% of couples eat together. 50% of couples end in divorce. And as I mentioned last night, in a recent study that found that 35 to 45% of everyone that is married, if they could go back in time and remarry someone else, they would. They're simply staying for a number of reasons. We don't want to simplify that. But oftentimes they will simply stay married to that person for financial reasons. Sometimes it's because they have kids. And sometimes they just don't want to deal with the conflict. But that's a staggering number. And sadly, on any given Sunday, there are 13 million more women who are going to church than there are men. In other words, husbands and wives are not together coming to church. Most children today, this is the worst in history in this country. You should know this. Because the enemy would love for you to focus so much on the politics of what's happening in November that you forget to realize what the problem that's happening in the American family. Most children today are born to a single parent. Let me say it again. Most children, most moms giving birth are giving birth to a one-parent household. And I think I put on here, maybe not on this particular one, but that the average family only is having dinner together as a family. You remember when we all used to sit together as a family and we'd ask each other, how's our day? That's only happening once or twice a week. Again, the worst in history. 1 out of every 4 young people are under the age of 30 have considered suicide right now. 74% of teenage girls feel an extraordinary amount of pressure to please everyone. And 20 million youth today are suffering from a mental disorder. And the third leading cause of death for our young people is suicide. The third leading cause. St. Anthony the Great says, can there be, someone asked him, someone that was blind had come to St. Anthony, he said, can there be anything worse than losing your eyesight? And yes, he replied, yes, it's your vision. It's losing the vision. Do you guys remember who this man is? His name is Matt Emmons, and he was an Olympic medalist who performed in a number of Olympics. Where this all comes in is in 2004 at the Olympics in Athens. He was a rifleman. He was known to be able to hit the target hundreds and hundreds of yards away. In fact, he was so gifted that as a rifleman, the way that they teach you how to do a rifle and to shoot, none of us are shooters here, at least don't raise your hand if you are, but they would sit there and they would aim, and a rifleman would learn how to know when to shoot between heartbeats. They would be able to hear when their heart is beating, boom, 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 and then that pause they would shoot, because if they were shooting at the moment of the heartbeat, oftentimes the gun would shoot up and they would miss the target. That's how gifted Matt Emmons was. He was winning the competition in 2004. You can find all of this online, by the way. Winning the competition. He was at his last target. He aimed and was looking to try to hit the target. All he had to do was hit the target, hit somewhere on the target, and he would have won another gold medal. In fact, everyone that was competing there, all they were competing for was for the bronze or the silver, because they thought for sure this guy had already guaranteed it. He sits there and he aims. He's aiming, shoots. And as he shoots, he misses the target totally and hits the person's target right next to him. In other words, he was aiming his gun. He was aiming at what he thought was the vision, but he aimed in the wrong area. He missed the target. And that's his face when he realized, I just missed that target. I never want you to journey in life or stand before Christ, whenever that day is, friends, and have that face. To wonder, why did I not take care of the precious gift that God gave me in my marriage? So I asked this last night, I'll remind you all. What is God telling all of us to stop doing in our marriage that we are doing, that we know is not right?
What is he telling you? Listen to him. What is he saying today? Stop that. And what is he telling all of us? Start this. What is he saying? Stamata, stop that. And what is he saying to start? Because if you're not fighting for your marriage, then maybe the enemy is winning over your marriage. Let me say it in a very simple way. If your marriage is not butting heads with the devil every day, be careful. You may be walking right next to him. If your marriage is not butting heads, in other words, if you're not fighting for your marriage every day, be careful, because you may be walking right next to him. So what are the steps we can take today? Well, we're talking this retreat, the retreat organizers wanted to call this retreat Renewing Our Marriage. So what is renewing our marriage? It means relinquishing your old limited identity and becoming something more expanded, powerful, and closer to your true self. So do you know that Pascha in the Orthodox Church is not just about Christ's resurrection? I mean, that's obviously the key of all of this. But do you know that at the Paschal service, we are reading the exact same words, the exact same epistle that is read when all of us were baptized, when we were renewed, we were born again into the image of Christ. Because for us, Easter is directly associated with a rebirth. And you'll hear that all next week. So it's putting off the old and putting off the new. And just real quick, St. Maximus the Confessor says, being a Christian is an entirely new way of being a human. Only godly human is truly human. In other words, your job, listen to me everyone, look here, camera people over here. Listen, when you become a Christian, you're not like everyone else. You may be in the environment, but you're called to be outside of that environment. When the priest says after you take communion, save, O God, what? These your people, and bless your inheritance. You are the inheritance. You are the inheritance of God. Then St. Irenaeus of Lyon says, He, Christ, is the head of a new humanity. The glory of God is the human person who's fully alive. So however you were before this retreat, hopefully you'll remember that I've got to put off the old. And that's a daily act that we do. So I mentioned this a couple years ago, and I'll just remind you all with this. Last year, as you all know, now King Charles was, once his mother, Queen Elizabeth, had died, the moment that she breathed her last breath, he immediately became the king, even though they did not have the coronation for many, many months afterwards. In other words, the moment that Queen Elizabeth breathed her last breath, King Charles became the king. What I need you to hear me on this is this, everyone. Jesus Christ, when he rises from the dead, we call him in the church the King of glory. He's already the king. The question you and I have to ask ourselves is, have you crowned him? Have you had the coronation where you say, God, I need you now. I don't care what I did in the past, but I need you today to crown my marriage. Who are you crowning? So these are the 8 different topics that we're going to have over the 8 little mini sessions. The first was the king over your family. So the average family today spends about 2.5 hours on their iPhone. The average dinner cleanup time is only about 4 minutes. That's because many people today, to be honest with you, are eating dinner by themselves, not because we're great cleaners. The average American takes less than 7 days vacation. The genuine, as I mentioned earlier, the genuine family time is quality time of conversation is only about 4 minutes. Blaise Pascal writes this, man finds nothing so intolerable as to be in a state of complete rest. In other words, you and I are having a hard time simply being at rest because our minds are constantly telling us what we need to be doing. And what we don't realize is that many of us are so stressed out. So stress will separate me from my family and church. When you're tired, you will see yourself compromise on your morals and values. When you are tired, you will see yourself separate yourself and oftentimes not come to church on Sundays. not read your Bible, not say your prayers. Why? Because you're so tired and stressed. Not only that, well, when you're tired, you separate yourself from your spouse. How many times, men, and I would argue too, women, you come home from a long day's day of work, you're tired, you're agitated, and sometimes you could snap at your spouse. Stress will create that in a relationship, and it will keep me from fulfilling God's purpose. Because I'm so focused on crowning my job or crowning something else that I have not crowned the King over my life. And so I mention all this as a reminder for you all, is that the devil can't make you sin, he'll just make you busy. If the devil cannot make you sin, he'll just make you busy. And many of us in this world right now, we walk around and we wear this like a label. Even if you ask the papa this, they'll say, how is everything at the church? Oh, so busy. And we even in our world, some of you who are retired are working now more than you did when you were unretired. And you'll say, I'm just so busy, and that's okay. Yes, it's busy. But we do not realize that the enemy loves busy people. Because if you're busy in your life, you don't have time to spend with the giver of life. Bound under Satan's yoke. Be careful of busyness, everyone. So we have to make some choices today. And so I want to give you these areas. This is all in that first one about crowning God as the king of your family. I want you, number one, is to stay focused. Focus on less is more, and focus on what matters most. So everyone, you need to know this, and those of you that are in the financial world, you will know this, that right now in America, we have more households in debt with credit card debt than in any other time in recorded history. We are spending 128% of our salary. That may not be you, but I can guarantee you it's someone that you know. Most of us, as you all should know this right now, are only wearing about 20% of the clothes we have in our closet. I don't know why all the women are looking down, but anyway. So what do we do? When we talk about focusing on less is more, here's some practical things you should do. More is not better. Don't buy into that. Don't buy that. You have a bigger house, a bigger car, all this stuff. I'm telling you right now, I have a lot of people that come into my office who are very, very wealthy people, who are very unhappy people. More is not always better. And be careful of retail therapy. If you don't need it, you don't buy it. If you're not wearing it, then get rid of it. You can bless someone else with your closet. Don't waste your food. If you're not going to eat it, don't put on your plate. Just on a side note, if we just took all the food that we throw away and God bless the United States of America, we could feed the world. That's just in America, how much we throw away in this world. And every 20 seconds, a child dies of hunger in this world. Make you think twice about how much you put on for lunch. I mean that in a nice way, but seriously, we need to stop wasting food. So you take your mess and you go out and bless. St. Paisios says it this way: the person who is possessed by material things is always subjugated to unhappiness and anxiety. He trembles for fear that his things will be taken away from him. Be careful, everyone. And now I want you to focus on less is more, but focus on what matters most. Your health matters. Like some of you are not taking care of your health, and I'm going to be honest with you, this is where I fall short. I'm just being totally transparent with all of you. I'm going to the doctor on Monday, thanks to my wife, Roxanne. I haven't been to the doctor in like 2-3 years. So just on a side note, I'm preaching to myself on this message, on this particular point. My health matters. Our relationships matter. My son told me when we first, about 6 years into my ordination as a priest, I'll never forget, he told me one time, and those of you that are priests' kids, you may be able to relate to this. He came up to me and I was working on his sermon. He kept trying to talk to me. He was only about 6 or 7 years old. And I said to him, George, stop talking. I got to work on this sermon. And he looked at me and he says, Baba, you make a better priest for the people than you do for us. Relationships matter. Purpose matters. In other words, God has a plan for you to do on this earth. And the Archons, you guys are doing a great job. Seriously, what you're doing. Every 8 minutes, a Christian around the world, at least according to the statistics that I read, every 8 minutes, a Christian in this world is dying for their faith. That's serious, and what you guys are doing is commendable, but keep it up. And then eternity matters. And for those of you that are young people, you may remember this, that there's a phrase called YOLO, hashtag YOLO. Some of you may not know that, but those of you that may be online. But YOLO means, the acronym is, you only live once. That's not true. Like you'll hear people tell you all the time, enjoy your life, Nico. You only live once. That's a lie. Enjoy your life, yes, but you do live twice. It's YOLT, not YOLO. It's you only live twice. And the life that we're going to will be a lot longer than the life that we're currently in. So what do you do with that when you talk about making sure that things matter? Is take time for self-care. Go to the gym. Go on a walk. Do things that feed you. Pick up your favorite book. Watch a program that allows you to relax. Saint Ephrem says this, if you give all of your life to this earth, then earth is going to give you a tomb. But if you give all of your life to heaven, heaven's going to give you a throne. Secondly, is not only do we want to focus on what matters, but choose today to have Christ at the center of your life. Sometimes we talk about the Orthodox Church in ways that we're talking about it as some sort of beautiful thing, that like a piece of furniture, like, wow, we're so old as a church. It's so beautiful. Look at the ornateness. Look at all these great things. And God's sitting there going, okay, I get that it's a nice fireplace, but doggone it, the fireplace was meant to have a fire in it, so put a log on it. Sometimes that's how we are with the Orthodox Church. We observe it, we admire it, but we never make it home. We never light it in our own life. So if God is not the Lord over all of your life, He's not the Lord at all in your life. So I shared this a couple years ago, just a reminder for all of you, is the rule of 15. That every day, non-negotiable, we spend 15 minutes with God. It's non-negotiable because you're under attack whether you realize it or not. That you spend 5 minutes in prayer. St. John Chrysostom says, everywhere, wherever you find yourself, set up an altar to God in your mind by means of prayer. That a family, a couple that prays together, what do they do? They stay together. St. Theophan the Recluse says this. Can you all read this with me? Together. Where there is no prayer and fasting, there are the demons. By the way, don't tell people what you're fasting from. No one cares. I mean, to be honest with you, we're sitting there going, I'm fasting from sugar, or I'm coffee, pasta. Don't say that stuff. Because if you're just simply fasting without prayer, you're just going on a diet. That's what we call it. It's simply a diet. You got to attach the prayer to it. If not, you have what that's called there. You have 5. This is an old picture. Roxanne has not seen this yet. Roxanne, check this out. This is before the ordination, and this is what you see after the ordination. But anyways, this is what we did for the Greek Archdiocese when we were still dating, a long time ago. 5 minutes of reading your Bible. So every day, 5 minutes of prayer. Next time, 5 minutes of reading your Bible. The Bible, St. John Chrysostom says, was never meant to be closed in a book, but engraved in our hearts. So say it like this, everyone. Bibles that are falling apart usually belong to couples who are not. Bibles that are falling apart usually belong to couples who are not. Let me ask you a question internally. Only 3% of Christians read their Bible on a day-to-day basis. I'm not asking you to raise your hand, just simply asking you to think about this. Every one of us should be on there if that's where we're at. I'm not saying you are, but simply asking you to think about it. If you're wondering, what do I need to start doing as a family? That may be it. That maybe for me, I need to hear God saying to me, I need to start listening to God. Don't just read the Bible, but let the Bible read you. Let's go one step further. If you only read what you like from the Bible and disregard what you don't like from the Bible, it's not the Bible you believe in, it is yourself. If your God never disagrees with you or your marriage or how things are going, you might be worshiping an idealized version of yourself. And then 5 minutes of growing as a couple. I would encourage all of you this, and goes without saying, but it's to make sure that you and your spouse are in church together and that you're praying together. The single greatest influence in a child's life, men, this is for you, is the man. The father or a fatherly figure is who shapes whether or not a child stays in church. In fact, the statistics are that if a child does not have a father or a fatherly figure in church, it's 1 in 50. It's a 1 in 50 chance that that child stays in church. This is real. And I would just argue that, yes, there's problems out in the world, and what we see on television, what we see is acceptable, but the problem may not always be out there. Some of the problem is actually right in here. And then next, I want you to bring him into every situation of your life. In other words, as a couple, you're in this Archon retreat, you're worshiping, you're praying, but I don't want you to be something different than who you are here as you'd be at home. That God doesn't want to look at you and go, what happened in this situation? And then, like, who are you, Nick, here? And who are you there? And for many of us, we become multiple personality couples. We act one way when we're in front of people, something different. And the Bible says, if you claim to be religious, but don't control your tongue, you are fooling yourself. And your religion, listen, is worthless. So don't forget, every day, if we're going to have a renewed marriage, God has to be crowned. We have to have the coronation, and we have to crown him by staying focused. Focus on what matters, everyone. That we would choose to have Christ at the center of your life and choose to bring Christ in every situation we have as a couple.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Does anyone have any questions about crowning him king in our lives? Try to write them down. We are going to do a little bit of a Q&A at the end, if you do have them. So yes, crowning him king over our lives. Let's wait on that 1 second. That is what's prompting us to pray more in our marriages. And that is what prompts us to imitate the image of Christ and the attitude of Christ and to act according to the mind of Christ. If we don't know his words, if we are not familiar with his wisdom, it doesn't resonate in our minds when it comes to how we automatically relate to our spouse, because we relate very unconsciously most of the time. So what you've been simmering in, how well you've crowned him Lord over your life, that is what's going to drive your unconscious relations to your spouse. It's what inspires our choices to be led more by him rather than ourselves. It's how we get away from self-preservation and we enter something called relationship preservation. I want you to remember that. The difference between self-preservation and relationship preservation. We're going to talk about that a lot today. So I want you to also think about that your marriage becomes a form of serving God. Have you ever thought about your marriage as a form of serving God? Because it is. How we relate to our spouse is our gift back to him, because our spouse is his gift to us. And what we do with our spouse, how we treat our spouse in the good times and in the rough times, is our gift back to him. I had a couple recently they came in and they were really so frustrated by their differences. For those of you who were here last night with the personality test, this is a couple who was different on every single letter. And they asked me, they said, we are fighting so much, like literally every week. And they said, is it even worth trying? And my answer is always, yes. There's only 2 times I tell people no. So the problem, when I started digging deeper, really was not that their differences were the problem. It wasn't their personality preferences. It was in those differences. They had put those differences on the throne of their marriage, and that became how they related to their spouse. In those differences, they became so upset about everything that bothered them that they stopped pursuing each other, which meant they stopped pursuing Christ. They were so bogged down in the negative, there was no positive momentum, there was no love. Okay, so they had really forgotten all about being generous with the goodness. Being generous in the friendship, which, by the way, we're going to hear later, is the only thing that we have that protects us against the negative in a marriage. Okay, so all relationships, you should know this, go through cycles. Every single relationship has relationship cycles that are unique to your relationship. It's why we might have the same argument again and again and again. The content changes, the dynamic stays the same. And it's also why when we're good, we are great. And we can't think of a thing we don't like about our spouse. Okay, this is a normal cycle in a relationship. In positive cycles, we only see the best in our partner. Maybe your partner does something kind for you. You know, maybe they surprise you with your favorite coffee when you were least expecting it, or maybe they speak gently to you about something that normally upsets them. You feel seen, loved, supported, and cared about. That prompts virtue within you, kindness, fondness. You might then even overlook their next mistake, thinking, no big deal. I'm married to the best human in the world. These cycles make us laugh more, they make us reach out more, and they make our narrative about each other, even in neutral times, extremely positive. This contrasts with the negative cycle. That's, I cannot remember what I loved about you. Like, I don't even know why we got married. This happened with one of my couples recently. She has a tendency of forgetting to lock the door when she leaves the house. You know, she lets the dogs out the back and she forgets to lock the door. So husband comes home and finds the door not only unlocked, but it was wide open. You can imagine he wasn't happy. So an argument happened about this perpetual problem. And by the way, every couple has a perpetual problem. So think about the thing that you and your spouse tend to get into the most arguments about, the perpetual problem. So an argument happens. The argument promoted distance. The distance led to arguing more, even about other things. It had nothing to do with the door. So why did you leave your thing on the bed when I told you to hang it up? Well, why didn't you call the dry cleaner? I asked you to do that. Little things. Chip it away. Arguing more leads to forgetting what we actually like about each other. That fuels distance and disconnection. The distance makes it easy to fight more. It's a vicious cycle. So suddenly we can't remember any good, and we get back to the moment of, why did I even marry you? All of this happens from a door that was left unlocked. It is extremely quick. We unconsciously relate to our spouse. So how do we protect ourselves from these negative cycles? We have to step in front of them. And we protect ourselves from the frequency, the duration, and the intensity of these cycles by doing things that give birth to this very generous friendship. We create a lot of positive momentum in all the neutral times. And so research has found that the quality of a couple's friendship is what motivates couples to repair any conflict. The quality of your friendship is what motivates you to repair any conflict. So if I can't remember laughing with you yesterday, why would I be motivated to repair this conflict today? I'm not missing anything. It improves our thought life, even in neutral times, and eases all the small tensions. So really, relationships require two superpowers. Sorry, I missed that one. They require pursuing the good through generosity, the generosity toward the friendship, and they require knowing how to protect us from the bad. So both bring something important to the relationship, but neither can stand on their own. If we're only really good at knowing how not to fight or knowing how to blend our fights, but we have no friendship, there's no emotional connection. If we're really good at a friendship, but we don't know how to fight right, we escalate and we disconnect. Neither can stand on their own. So we're going to talk about how to create these positive cycles. Reaching out and being present, remaining interested and extremely curious about each other. We're going to talk about each of these. Protecting quality time, and appreciating, serving, and being generous with our interpretations of each other. Okay, so what is reaching out and being present? Happy couples tend to reach out for each other's attention. How much of the time? 50% of the time? Raise your hands. 60% of the time? 70%? Is everyone going to get it right because it's up there? It's not up there. 86% of the time, happy couples, healthy couples, God-led couples, God-fearing couples are reaching out to connect to each other. So that means like 8.5 out of 10, they're going, hey, can I tell you this? Hey, I read this story the other day. Hey, did you hear that news article? I want to tell you about it. Hey, I'm really tired. Can I tell you about my fatigue? They're constantly reaching out. And guess how often they respond? Do we know? Well, unhappy couples only respond 30% of the time. So 3 out of 10 of those times with me jumping over here saying, hey, see me, I want to talk to you. 30% of the time, unhappy couples who later divorce respond and say, oh, tell me about that. Healthy couples are initiating and responding 86% of the time. It is incredible. They see each other, they're on each other's radar, and they're willing to turn toward that person and say, I see you and I want to learn about you. I want to be present with you. I want to be in your headspace. I want to be in your inner world. Tell me everything. This is what they're doing. At its core, this is about being generous with our time and our undivided focus. And listen, I wish I could say that I do this as well as 86% of the time. But my daughter got my attention when she was about 6 years old, and I think God has a way of speaking through children. And I was working, and she was talking to me, and I was working, and she was talking to me, because remember, I'm a judger, so I tend to work too much. And she looked at me, and she goes, Mom. She kind of hit her foot on the ground. She goes, could you please listen with your eyes? I still have chills. Could you listen with your eyes? She knew I wasn't listening. She knew I was saying, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. But was I really listening enough to ask a question that allowed her to deepen what she was sharing? No. I was just allowing her to state what she had to say, but I wasn't connected to it. And she felt it, and she called me on it. And now, when she talks, you better believe, doesn't matter what I'm doing, I look up. And we tried to do the same with each other. Giving of our time is the only love language that requires a real, in-the-moment sacrifice of anything else I could be doing. It is the only love language. I can buy a gift with a click, right? Giving of my time, by the way, affirmations, that's 2 seconds I can say it. Giving of my time is the only love language that requires a real, in-the-moment, virtuous and generous sacrifice. And it is the purest and rarest form of generosity, is to give of ourselves to another human. Carl Rogers once put it this way, and I love this. He said, when someone really hears us without passing judgment, without trying to take responsibility for us, and without trying to mold us, it feels really good. And he hit the nail on the head. Because why do you think people come to see therapists? Why do people come to my office? That's all they want. To feel seen, to feel heard, not to be molded, even though we do a little molding. We do a lot of molding, but we don't do it in the way that's so direct. But most of us get so caught up in our days that we forget to be caught up in each other. And it is the interplay of both reaching out and responding that creates the connection. So think about yourself in these scenarios. What do you normally do? Just think about it in your mind. When someone walks in a room, do you look up? Do you actually get up and walk over to them? Do you open up conversation? Close the laptop, put down the phone? Do you actually turn away from the television? These are all opportunities, they're all decisions that we could be making. How about when someone comes home from work for the day? What's your routine? What does that look like? You know, we're supposed to spend at least 2 to 5 minutes on something called reunions. There is a daily reunion with your partner when they come home from anything. 2 to 5 minutes is what's required. How about when someone says, I'm so exhausted? Is that a bid for your attention? What do you think? Absolutely. I'm saying, hey, dig in a little bit. Let me tell you what's making me so exhausted. So the other person, how do they respond? They're supposed to say, hey, what's making you so exhausted? Tell me about that. What's going on? That's how you respond. How about when someone says, gosh, they're trying to do something, they're going, this is so difficult. Is that a bid to be seen? Yes. Yes, guys, these are all bids, because you're supposed to step in and go, how can I help you? I'm supposed to stop what I'm doing and say, how can I help you? How about when someone says, this looks like a great new movie? Is that one too? 100%. You get the hang of it. Anything your spouse says is an opportunity for you to look over. So what are we doing? We're monitoring distractions and multitasking. We're doing what my daughter says, and I'll always give her this quote. We are listening with our eyes. And we're turning to our spouse and asking, even if they don't say anything, we're literally looking at them and saying, what's going on with my spouse in this moment? Like, what's it like to be them in this moment? Just do that once a day. How are they doing really? Mirror emotions. So we're supposed to actually mirror our emotions, and we were actually built, God's design is amazing, we were built to synchronize facial expressions when we connect. We were built to synchronize when we connect. So if someone's facial expression is not following yours, are they really connecting? Or are they doing what I was doing when I was on the computer? And I was saying, that's right, So celebrate with them in joy. Like, allow them to savor. If they're telling you about something that's amazing, ask a lot of questions and help them celebrate it. Ask questions that deepen the conversation. Hey, if someone says their day was rough, what made it so rough? Like, I want to know. I had this one guy, he was so amazing at this. Of course, he was an extrovert, his wife was an introvert. And she came home and he'd say, we don't really connect. You know, she's in the kitchen and I just don't know how to connect with her. And so he said, well, what'd you do today? And she said, well, I went to the grocery. That was it, nothing more. He's like, okay, all right. Well, what grocery did you go to? Oh, I went to Whole Foods. Well, why did you choose Whole Foods over, the typical grocery that we go to? Well, did you find anything special? Well, what made you decide to go to the grocery today as opposed to yesterday? I mean, he kept going and going and going and going, and eventually he landed on this, which was so beautiful. She said, today is the anniversary of the loss of someone I loved deeply. And she one time made this chicken soup for me. And I just thought I would go and get the ingredients for that soup. Like, what? That's what was happening in her inner world. He knew nothing of this person. This was someone that she knew well before she ever met him. But that little stream of questions helped him follow into a part of her world that he really needed to know. Okay. Staying interested and curious about each other. So one of my other patients, all of a sudden she came and she said, we've never fought in 20 years, my husband and I. She says, but now we're fighting and it's over his new job. So I dig a little deeper. Why are you fighting over this new job? Well, he's traveling a lot. Okay. Upon further questioning, I learned in the last year, she lost her father. Her mom was placed in memory care. Her kids both went off to college. They were twins. She had just retired. They moved to a new community. Her closest friend that she grew up with also moved out of state. And then her husband got this new job that required him to travel. So what were they really fighting about? Was it the new job? That's right. Listen, they were fighting about the fact that nobody understood that the season of life she was in had changed her. The season of life she was in had completely changed her. In 20 years, she's not the same person that she was when they first got married. And your spouse is not the same now as they were the day that you got married. I am very different. So much has happened to me since we got married. So much has happened to Nick since we got married. We faced so many trials, I can't even go through them without tears. And we can't assume that the questions that we asked our spouse when we first got married are still how they feel today. So they're not the same person now as they were since losing a parent. They're not the same now as they are since having to care for an aging parent or becoming an orphan because they lost all their parents. Or before their kids left home, or before they had a baby. Like, so much changes us. And so when we've been married for a long time, we tend to think we know everything there is to know about our partner. But you don't. Like, I promise you, their inner world is changing every year, every 5 years, every decade. They are deepening and growing. When I read the Bible, and every couple of years I do a reading of a Bible in 1 year. It takes me 2 years to do it in what's supposed to be done in 1 year. But every 2 years, when I read the Bible, I hear it differently based on the season of life and the chapter of life that I am living in. And it is like, wow, Lord, you just read me. You read me. And so that's the same thing we have to do with our spouse. We have to bring them into our innermost thoughts, our dreams, our hopes, because all of those change. We have to talk about the worries that keep us up at night. And we don't always make our inner world available to our partner. I mean, just like this woman in the kitchen. She wasn't sharing why she went to the store, but it was there. If we see our partner, we ask enough questions, we often stumble on something new. You know, one time, Nick and I were talking about dreams and sleep and nothing really interesting, and then all of a sudden he goes, you know, I have this recurring dream. Has he shared it with you guys? He has a recurring dream. And it is where he's standing before God and he's asking Nick, hey, what did you do with my son? Like, Nick, what did you do with Jesus? And that was like, what? Where did that come from? You've been having this dream? It's profound. Like, you have a major responsibility to be sharing Christ. No wonder you feel so on fire to share. Okay, but this is how we arrive there. Another wife told me the other day, she goes, you know, I went out with my best friend and they were talking about their wonderful marriage, and this particular woman I was seeing didn't have the best marriage, and she said her friend was sharing how she and her husband wanted to travel when they retire. They want to, you know, get a mountain house, and they want to do all these things. And she sat back and she goes, wow, my husband and I used to talk about that when we first got married. We've been married for 30 years, and she said, we don't dream together anymore. We don't talk about what we hope for our future. And she said, I want to dream again. And these are all things that we have to do. I love Psalm 138. Please write down in your mind Psalm 138. This is how God describes his level of knowing us. It says, Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. And before a word is on my tongue, you knew it completely, like you knew what I was going to say. How precious to me are your thoughts, how vast is the sum of them. When I count the number of grains of the sand, when I wake up, you're always there. You know my heart, and you know all my anxious thoughts. This is how God knows us. And are we not called in John 15:12 to love others the way God loves us? Like, can you imagine knowing your spouse in that way? Like, every word before they say it, every anxious thought, their complete inner experience. We're supposed to be familiar with all the ways that we know exactly what they're thinking, doing, saying. So on the flight here, Nick knows that I get really bad motion sickness. I don't love to fly. But I'm fine if the window opens, you know, and I can see the horizon. Well, inevitably, I get put to someone, and I'm never in the window seat, right? I'm always in the middle. Inevitably, I always get put next to someone who gets in, they step in their seat, and what do? Shut the window, get on their phone. And I'm like, oh boy. And you know I'm an introvert, so I don't love to say, hey, I get motion sick, could you please open the window? So my dear husband here knows me. So as soon as that window shuts, he goes, excuse me, sir. He goes, I get a little motion sick on flights. Would you mind just opening the window a little bit? It helps me feel better. And I am inevitably grateful. I will overlook every next mistake for the next week because he did that very gentle thing. But it's because he knows me. It's because he knows me. Okay. Quality time. Oh, I do want you to take a picture of this because I'm going to have you guys do this. That's going to be your activity time for curiosity. And you might I actually think you have these handouts in your packet, but we're going to have you do that. So just grab a quick picture. Okay. Oh, go back? Okay. And I do think these are in their packet, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Okay, quality time. Nick went over all the research, so I'm not going to go over it. But listen, what does Philippians 4:8 say? Who knows it? Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is lovely, admirable, excellent, and praiseworthy. Hey, think about those things. Well, let me ask you, how do you practice Philippians 4:8 in marriage? to think about what is lovely and admirable in your spouse. If you are not spending quality time, to cultivate that and to see that. If you're not pouring into the friendship and all you're doing is fighting, try willing yourself to think lovely and admirable thoughts about your partner. Listen, we cannot manufacture the fruits of the Spirit very long. We have to draw nearer to Christ and our spouse if we want to live them consistently. We can willpower anything, but willpower runs out. So consider in your quality time, if together time is really together time, like are you present, are you engaged? I had a spouse tell me, gosh, every time I'm watching a movie and I'm laughing at all these parts or I'm tearing up, I look over my husband or wife, and guess what? They're on the what? They're on the phone. So are they laughing at the same time? No. So is that quality time? No. So can we watch TV together and actually have quality time? What do you think? Show of hands, yes? Yes? Who says no? We can watch TV together and have it be quality time if we're both watching it together, because we have an emotional connection at all the right moments. Not if one person's on their phone. We don't consider that quality time. So schedule it. We aim for the rule of thumb of 15 to 30 minutes daily. Something bigger once a week, about 2 hours, and something big once a month, like a full day. So I do want to say that date night, your 2 hours weekly, is really different than something I call State of the Union. The State of the Union is a great conversation I have every week about what's going on for us, what's upcoming, what are our house projects that we need to do, what's our schedule look like. It's all the big things that we need to just be domestic partners together about. It has nothing to do with quality connection, so we don't count State of the Union conversations. Okay? Go ahead and take a picture of that. That's going to be your activity card for quality time that we're going to have you guys do in just a few minutes. I love the thought bubbles there. Okay. Okay, so we really want to be generous. This is the most important one, with appreciation, serving each other, and with your thinking, with your interpretations of each other. So this is about giving good things to your spouse freely and abundantly, not because it is earned, because it is not a virtue to be generous toward your spouse when it's conditioned on the exact right conditions for you to live it. Research on generosity says that couples who score the highest on generosity are the most likely to report also being happy. They're also the most likely to stay together, just from one virtue, generosity. That's not just happening toward the world. It's not just what their marriage does for the world, it's what they do toward each other. So it's having generous spirits toward one another. So this is about going above and beyond ordinary expectations with small acts of intentional generosity that do good things for someone's spirit. So in this moment, I want you to think about something. I want you to think about, what do you love most about your spouse? Like truly love. Like that quality inspires you every time you see it. You're very fond of them, and it promotes a positive cycle when you see it. What quality do you love about your spouse? Second, what do you think their unique gifts are? I sent you a strength survey that I wanted you to fill out in addition to the personality ones, but this is all of your inherent gifts. We don't have time to talk about it, but you should look at it. If you don't know your partner's signature strengths, you should. We bring glory to God by knowing the strengths of our partner. How do we do that? Because we fan the flame of them when we see them. We fan the flame. Research says that we cultivate something in us that we've been noticed for. So if someone says, wow, that's amazing, you inspire me with that, guess what I'm going to go cultivate? I'm going to do more of that because I was reinforced for it. So you want to know what your kids are going to look like 20 years from now when they're small. You notice what you want them to cultivate. And adults are the same way. So you bring God glory by recognizing their strengths, by saying, wow, the way you talk to people is inspiring to me. Your confidence is inspiring to me. The way you stopped and served that homeless man, like, it opened my heart. I love how transparent and vulnerable you can be. I love how you know how to articulate what you feel. I love how kind you are. I love how you make everybody feel seen and heard. I love how hard you work. Thank you for working hard for our family. Like, whatever you admire them for, whatever you're in awe of, like, please don't just think it in your head. Research says most of the time when we see something we like in someone, we think it. But do we say it? Nope. So my general rule of thumb is if you think it, please say it. If they're not next to you, text it, email it, put a Post-it note for it. Please just remind them. Let your words speak life into your spouse and let it bring God glory. Be generous with serving each other. Again, look over at your spouse throughout the day, put them on your radar and ask, what do they need? When you know your spouse well, you know exactly what they need. You know what their face looks like. You know that long sigh that they're making when they're doing whatever it is that they're doing. You know what it means that they want you to go do. If you've been paying attention. And if you don't know, please ask. If they're working outside, go bring them a drink. Or better yet, just go stand there with them. You know, I love when Nick stands in the kitchen with me when I'm doing dinner. I don't exactly want him to, like, touch the dinner, but he does. He'll, like, put seasonings. I'm like, no, don't touch it. But I do want him to be there just in the kitchen with me. And you know what he did the other night? Which I just loved. We had to watch this movie because we were interviewing the director and the actor of the new movie, Unsung Hero. That's coming out on April 26th. If you have to go see this movie. It is a tremendous story of a Christian band and how they came to be. We're interviewing them, and we had to watch this movie before our radio show. Well, our radio show is Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock. We're usually busy coming home from work, running kids to soccer, and trying to prepare for the show and doing dinner and cleanup. So he said, we have to watch this movie. So what does he do? He brings the movie in the kitchen, props it up on the laptop, standing with me at the stove, and we're watching this movie together. And it was just the most tremendous gift. And the movie was inspiring. So it was a beautiful moment for us, rather than it having to be something I was trying to cram in after I cleaned up and would have felt really stressed. So thank you for doing that. We also want to be generous in our interpretations. We can be generous with how we make sense of things that our spouse does that upsets us. We're going to talk a lot about this in the conflict session, but you make interpretations about your spouse all day long, like constantly. Everything they do, you are evaluating consciously or unconsciously. So when you make a very generous interpretation of why they did something, you keep yourself in positive momentum. So if they forget to do something that you asked, the most generous interpretation you could give as to why they did it was, perhaps they've got a lot on their plate. Versus one of my wives, she said, and this was not a good marriage, she said, well, he just can't multitask. He's totally irresponsible. See the difference between he's got a lot on his plate versus he's totally irresponsible. Again, those interpretations are what knock us out of positive momentum or not. Okay, and we have an activity. If you guys can just take a quick picture of that. All right, so timing-wise, we should probably, this concludes this section. We got to figure out what time we need to go to lunch or not.
It's 12:20. So why don't we do this? Why don't we open up for questions and answers? And just in a real quick, just kind of review, we started out, this whole first section is all about God's blueprint for lasting love. How do we keep our marriages in one another, in love with one another? And then the second half is all about how do we deal with conflict? Or more importantly, how do we fight right? So in this first section, we talked about crowning God by putting him on the throne of your life. And then this last one, Roxanne talked about crowning him by being generous with our goodness. So I want to just open up for Q&A for a few moments, and then we'll just kind of see where we are with dinner, and then...
Do their breakout while they get lunch ready.
Yeah, we'll do questions and answers right now. Any Q&A right now? Yes, Lauren?
Roxanne, you said there were two reasons why you would agree on divorce.
You have a microphone?
What are those two?
Okay, the two reasons, she's asking the two reasons that I would agree on divorce. One is physical, emotional, or verbal abuse that is not repairable, okay? So sometimes abuse is repairable. Why? When someone's heart rate is escalated, okay, they are no longer in charge of what they are saying. Can we repair that by teaching them tools? Yes. If the person is willing, okay? We have beautiful tools for this and we can help these people. They're not called cobras. The cobras are people who verbally abuse with a low heart rate. They are not escalated. They will slice your throat, and they are comfortable doing so. In these situations, we say no, the marriage is finished, because there's no rehab for you. Okay, so I can tell when I'm sitting with someone, is this something that we can rehabilitate, or is it not? So I can sometimes put a pulse oximeter on somebody's finger in their fight and find out if this is a repairable marriage or not, just from looking at what their heart rate is doing. Most people are escalated, high heart rates, they're flooded. We're going to talk about that. There's been a few who are very cold and calculated, and they do not feel what they are doing. It's not safe to be in the marriage.
And just to add to that, to Lauren, is that the biggest reason for divorce, and you should all know this, is not infidelity. It's not an addiction. It's contempt. The leading cause of divorce is someone, as Roxanne was just sharing, where someone cannot stand that person, they're just simply there. And so as she was talking about, if any of us, because we can allow our heart to race, we can get angry, we can get upset, and that shows us in some ways that even though we're like that, we love that person, but we're just angry, we're passionate people. But when you can do it cold and you're like, no, we're not doing that, without a thought about it, without even a level of just of reflection, then that right there breeds contempt. And marriages that are struggling, most of the time divorce happens where there's just contempt. There's just an absolute, not a desire to try to help, not even a desire to even care.
More like a feeling of superiority in that situation. Like, I'm above you, and I want power above. And so power above dynamics are not safe in marriage. So we talk a lot about mutual submission in relationships. And you can find out if people are sort of open to this or they're not. The second reason is when infidelity is persistent, it's chronic, it's not a one-time thing. And the reason I say that is because we treat accidental affairs. They happen, people fall into temptation, they're led by sin, and but they are so repentant. Like, they are more upset about them than you will ever be upset at them. And they reset themselves. I call the other one serial offenders. People who serially offend in that way are not salvageable. That's not something they want to repair, so it's not safe to be in a marriage where infidelity is happening in a chronic sense. Because that's a character problem, that's not a behavior problem.
Any other questions? Any other questions at all? Okay, so in a few moments from now, I guess the kitchen will let us know whenever lunch is ready. But I just wanted to do one last little presentation, just have a few slides on this one. But I do want to just share with you all about how we build this lasting love, and talking to you about the third area is just crowning him by putting a log on the fire. So I just want to share with all of you this, and that is that relationships never stay where they're at. They never stay where they're at. They're either growing or they are declining. And I used the analogy earlier when we were talking about the Orthodox Church being this, oftentimes referred to as by people, as how marvelous of this antique fireplace it is. We admire the beauty. The problem is that we need to be lighting the fire. The same thing is true in marriage. Now, we are from Florida, just as you all know. This would be the coldest day of the year for us, just so you know. We're very uncomfortable. We got off the plane and we were like going, okay, we need our scarves, our gloves, and everything else. But when it gets about 65 degrees, don't make fun of us, but when it gets about 65 degrees in Jacksonville, we take out the fireplace. And yes, almost every home in Florida has fireplaces. Why? Because we get cold at 65 degrees. It's your spring, it's our deep winter. And I remember growing up, when we were growing up, my dad would light the fireplace at 65 degrees, and he would put a log on the fire, and we would sit there, and we would just kind of get all snugly together with watching him put the log on the fire, and sometimes we'd do our little s'mores or whatever. But eventually, after about an hour, that log would burn down. And someone had to be able to get up to go put a log on that fire, or the fire is going to come out. It's going to totally end. The same thing is true in marriage. You all started out, you didn't marry someone that you were not happy with or did not want to marry. There was a fire there. There was a passion there. Many of you, if I ask you right now, where did you meet your spouse? You can give me the greatest romantic love story. Or remember when you first kissed that person. Think about it for a moment. I know for some of you it was a while ago, but it's okay. Just rewind it. It'll come back. But maybe the first time that you had them meet your parents. Or if I asked you what was the greatest day that you had, you could remember the greatest time that you had in your past. The same thing is true, though, is that at some point, we can fall into the trap of not putting a log on the fire. And my encouragement for you in this little presentation, this is very short, just to give you some tips on how to better put a log on that fire. So here's the things I want you to ask yourselves, okay? Or things that I want you to think about. So if you are wanting to put a log on the fire, here's number one. Give God the first part of your day, okay? Remember me telling you this. You cannot give what you do not have. So when you are grounded in Christ, even when that spouse makes that mistake, does something that you did not want them to do, because you're so steeped in your faith, there's a level of mercy and compassion. So give God the first part of your day. Then start each day with a hug. Ladies, let me tell you something. There is power, and there's tests and studies on this, the power of the human touch, your human hand touching your spouse, okay? Give them a hug every day. 3, say I love you every time you part ways. And don't just say it. Say it. I love you. I was at the hospital last week, leaving the hospice area, and as I was leaving the hospice area, a gentleman was holding the elevator for me, and he was a young guy. I got onto the elevator. He was holding the elevator for me. He said, would you like to go down, Father? And I said, yes, I'd like to go back down to the lobby. As I'm going down, I said to him, who are you visiting? This guy's probably about in his mid-20s. He said, what are you doing here? And he says, I said, is your parents, are they in hospice? He goes, no, my wife. He said, last year, we were skiing in Vermont. And this year, I'm burying my wife. She had cancer. Life can change in just a moment. So when you leave every day, you don't know what's going to happen that day. And I know you know this. This is all low-hanging fruit. This is all things that you know. But doggone it, every day, say, I love you, and mean it. Compliment freely and often. Like, take opportunities every day to compliment. I cannot tell you how many wives I hear, husbands, listen to this, that are waiting for genuine compliments from their spouse. I had a Greek lady tell me the other day that all he wants me to do is make breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And all I'm asking him to do, I was like, wow, whatever you're doing, you probably need to tell every other guy out what to do. And he wants something fresh. Father, there cannot be leftovers. It has to be fresh food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm like, gosh, what did this guy do? Because in our house, that does not happen. But having said that, and so she's like, and all I want him to do is simply to recognize what I'm doing. Like just once in a while say, that food was excellent, and mean it. And she says, sometimes he'll do it for good for a day. Que meta, he's back to where he is. But compliment freely and often. Live each day as if it's your last. And let me say it this way. Live each day as if it's their last. Go on a date every week. Seriously. One of the things that we do, and we're not great, and I will tell you, just on a side note, Roxanne's very complimentary, but she can share a lot of things that, honest to God, that I'm not doing right. And one question that I asked Roxanne, I did this a couple weeks ago. I'm just going to be totally transparent with all of you. This is Nick Louh. This is it. I ask my wife every couple of weeks, I say, honey, how can I love you better? And it's a sincere, I don't want some, well, no, Nick, you're just doing so great. You're just the best thing, that would be great if she said that. But that's not the case. But I asked her, I said, honey, in our own little Louh's kind of language, how can I love you better? You know what she told me 2 weeks ago? I miss you. I just want you to spend time with me. So here I am doing a marriage retreat, and my wife is telling me that. And I would never know if I didn't ask the question. You have to recognize that being offensive. Love each other, live each day as if it's your last, and live as if it's their last. Stop sometimes, guys, and stop checking emails in your work. Trust me, America will never tell you to get off of work. You're going to be constantly working. There's never going to be a finish line unless you create it. Stop and smell the roses. Kiss unexpectedly. Kiss unexpectedly. Just one more time. I just want to make sure you do that. And yes. And apologize sincerely. Like, don't just say, okay, honey, I just want this to be over. I'm so sorry. Like, seriously, just say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry for what it created in you. Be forgiving. Guys, this is a problem that I struggle with, maybe not none of you, but guys, let your wife give you directions. And when she tells you to slow down and you're like, the 10th time you said it, we just left 20 seconds ago. Let her give you directions. Ladies, laugh at our jokes. Please, it means so much to us when you laugh at our jokes. Guys, ask her to marry you again. Like, ask your wife, you've been married 50 years. Today, when you're going home, would you still marry me, or will you marry me again? And then wives, you better say yes. You better say yes, or we're going to have some facilities, we're going to have some problems. And never go to bed mad, okay? These are just some little things that I want to do. And so we're going to take a break right now and just give you an opportunity. You're going to have lunch, okay? But while you're at lunch, I'm going to insert some date time with you all. I know you're going to be sitting with a whole bunch of your friends, and that's great. Even make it like a joke if you want to. But take at least 2 or 3 of those slides that are in your folder and begin to answer them with your spouse. Just answer them. Take some time. Look at your spouse's strengths, their struggles, all that stuff. Let's talk about it. And Archon Peter Scaddis is going to address this.
Make an announcement. Thank you, Father Nick, and thank you, Father Roxanne.
Thank you.
I will look forward to your next session.